When I was younger, I used to love jumping into an MMO game, or massive multiplayer online for short. These sorts of games from RuneScape, Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, and more, they are these massive, persistently online worlds for you to get lost in. But there's been a change in the last few years, and this genre of game is now starting to die out. And there's a very big story that we got to talk about that has proven that the MMO genre might be on life support, and how the industry is answering this problem. But first, I want to talk about Ashes of Creation, which is also an MMO game. It was a promise to be a return to the roots of what fans loved about this particular genre. Ashes has also been in development for a really long time, but recently it was announced that Ashes of Creation would no longer have any content made for it. The game, which was in early access, was not only shutting down, but all of their staff have actually been let go too. This all happened really fast, and it has hit that community like a truck. So while I want to explore the downfall of Ashes of Creation in this video, I also want to ask and look into if the whole MMO genre as a whole is kind of dying in front of our eyes, and if such a genre is even viable anymore to invest into these days. As Insider Gaming reported here, amidst Ashes' shutdown effective immediately, the entire staff who worked on the game have also been refused by Intrepid Studio for their final paychecks as well. The wild part is just 2 days before this announcement, Intrepid Studios promised to release a full roadmap for Ashes' future content. So this change was not only sudden, but honestly really suspicious too. So how did this all start? Well, Steven Sheriff, that's the creative director of this game and the founder of Intrepid Studios, went to Discord to lay out the news himself to the fans. So let me read you what he said as it reads. "I can make a limited statement in my personal capacity and not on behalf of the company regarding the situation. Control of the company shifted away from me and the board began directing actions that I could not ethically agree with or carry out. As a result, I chose to resign in protest rather than lend my name or authority to decisions I could not ethically support. Following my resignation, many of the senior leadership team resigned. Following those departures, the board made the decision to issue WARN Act notices and proceed with a mass layoff. I cannot responsibly speak to further details at this time due to ongoing legal and governance matters. What I can say is that the developers and staff acted in good faith and deserved better than the uncertainty they are now facing. I am incredibly dismayed by the situation." So as of right now, we don't really know what exactly was being said or decided behind the scenes when it came to Ash's development, but I can probably guess if the board was moving Ash towards a direction that Steven Sheriff wasn't happy with, it's probably something to do with the pay-to-win mechanics. Since I looked up the game, and currently Ashes has cosmetic-only microtransactions, and they were going to also implement a $14.99 monthly subscription fee once the game went into full access too. Already though, this game, which wasn't even in full release like I said, it's currently in alpha while still, demanding players pay Intrepid Studio more stuff all the time. This whole 1.0 release was actually meant to be announced as the full release, and now it's never going to happen. Actually, if you go to their Kickstarter as seen here, over $3 million was already crowdfunded by almost 20,000 eager MMO players to allow Intrepid Studios to create this game for their fans. And by the way, every single stretch goal for Ashes was met, with the community support crushing every single milestone. So yeah, there was definitely interest in this game succeeding and becoming the next big MMO. But the crazy part is near the bottom of the Kickstarter, as seen there, they promised to finish this game, and if they didn't, that all money fundraised by this Kickstarter would be refunded to the people who gave their hard-earned money to Intrepid Studios. But now with the game, which was in development for close to 10 years, about 9 years at this point actually, is now all crashing down, what's likely going to happen is that this board of investors or whatever at Ashes of Creation will now do their best to probably just take as much money from this sinking ship as possible and then run away into the voidness of the internet. Meaning that the $3 million kickstarted amount will never likely be refunded to that almost 20,000 backers. Along with God knows how much more money was generated from the whole microtransaction store to further fund development of future content too. As of right now, as seen here, the people who led this now insane financial disaster also have their legal names and faces plastered on their Kickstarter page, as of the time of me writing this video anyways. The crazier part is I decided to look into who exactly is on this board of directors or investors, if you will, when it came to Intrepid Studios and Ashes of Creation. To my surprise, as seen here, apparently the board consists of one single member, Steven Sheriff, the guy who founded Intrepid Studios. So wait a second, how does that make any sense? Because Steven, as we just saw, just announced on Discord that he was leaving Intrepid Studios because the board was making decisions that he didn't apparently agree with. But how does that make sense if he is apparently the sole member of this group? From what I could gather online, the only other member of this board that people know about is John Moore, who, as you can see via the Kickstarter page again, is also the chief financial officer of Intrepid Studios. But there's another twist here. You see, Steven and John, they're actually married. So the entirety of Ashes of Creation is being held together by these two men's marriage to one another. So if the board, as Steven puts it, was making decisions that he couldn't agree with and wanted no part in, it means that the CFO, this John Moore, who's Steven's actual husband, was the one that Steven was maybe referring to when he said that the unethical decisions were being made against his will, allegedly. So the likelihood now that I'm gathering is what we're witnessing is some sort of a marriage imploding before our very eyes that has now impacted the lives of dozens of game developers that are all working for, again, about 9 years or so on this promised MMO project that was meant to save this dying genre. But what if I told you it gets even messier? Now we got two men in a marriage basically ruining everything for everyone, but what about the employees and their promises? Well, thankfully, devs at Intrepid are also starting to leak information, and fellas, I gotta say, this is getting really messy very quickly. Because when a studio like this implodes before your very eyes, you start to wonder, well, sure, I may be out of a job probably now, but what about the other promises they made to me? My 401k, my investments in this company, what about my health insurance? What about my pay so I can stay on top of all my bills? Well, an email leaked, and let me read it for you guys, because this is essentially DEFCON 1 levels of, yeah, these people are going to get sued into the darkest pits of oblivion. As it reads here in the leaked email to Intrepid Studios developers, "Dear team, this is a difficult message to send, and we recognize how unsettling it may be to receive due to the company's current financial condition. Intrepid Studios is providing this notice pursuant to the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification WARN Act. This notice is being issued to all employees as a precautionary measure while the company evaluates next steps at this time. No final decisions have been made regarding which positions may be impacted. A portion of the team may be asked to continue working as the company evaluates operational and financial alternatives. Others may be affected by a reduction in force if the company is unable to move toward its new current form. Employees who are impacted will be notified directly with additional information. With respect to compensation, payroll scheduled for February 1st, 2026 cannot be processed at this time due to the company's current financial condition. The company is reviewing its obligations and options and will share updates as soon as possible. Regarding benefits, company-sponsored health insurance coverage may be affected by changes in employment status. Information regarding benefit continuation options, including COBRA, is expected to be provided by the plan administrator earlier this week." And then they say a bunch of other stuff. But okay, there's a lot to go over there. Firstly, Intrepid Studio devs are now not only losing their health coverage once this is all said and done, but this email also confirms that the financials within Intrepid are currently so in flux, which is why the payments that are promised to the developers are now being frozen for like the foreseeable future. That's crazy. Meaning these developers, who did nothing wrong by the way, they just did their jobs making the game like usual, are now the ones being punished ultimately the most for the decisions of Steven Sheriff and his husband John Moore, who are allegedly, apparently, the only active board members who basically just destroyed their own company. I decided to also look into that last part, that COBRA thing they mentioned there, so I googled it, and here's what it says. COBRA stands for Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. It's a U.S. federal law that allows employees and their families to temporarily continue employer-provided group health insurance for 18 to 36 months after a qualifying event such as job loss, reduction in hours, or divorce. So this means that Intrepid Studios is legally bound to give their employees, who obviously rely on this healthcare program, about a year and a half to about 3 years worth of health insurance by federal law, no matter what happens here pretty much. But after that period of time, yeah, they're cut off and then they're on their own, which is definitely what's happening right now with Intrepid and Ashes based on what we know right now. But yes, this is crazy, dude. A really bad situation all around. Like, I feel for these developers because, again, it's not their fault. Job losses are also effective immediately too. We have Jennifer Bridges, that was this lady here sitting right below the husband duo on that Kickstarter page, that has already confirmed that she has been terminated from Intrepid Studios via social media, and she's already looking for a new position in the games industry too. We also have another employee of Intrepid named Margaret Cron, as seen here via LinkedIn, confirming that she too has been let go go from the studio, effective immediately. And as she says, they're near the bottom. As for how this all ended, I don't really have the words. It wasn't what I expected. So this tells me that this news is just as new as it is to the developers as it is to all of us as well. So nobody knew this was coming pretty much. This hit like a tidal wave out of nowhere, and things are just crumbling really quickly and weirdly too. What's also crazy is that on Kickstarter, they had various tiers of what people could invest into, and the highest, which was called Avatar of the Phoenix, as you can see here, was labeled as a $10,000 reward tier. If you bought that, you then got to work with the developers to design a world fortress. You were also promised an invitation to the launch party of Ashes of Creation in Las Vegas, with a 2-night stay with accommodations at the Wynn Resort. You would also have dinner with the development team in Las Vegas, of course, and join a weekend-long gaming session of Dungeons & Dragons that would be spearheaded by Stephen Sheriff himself, alongside other unique things like forum badges, in-game character titles, and much more, along with keys of the game, obviously, too. So my question for this reward tier specifically, which by the way was backed by 5 people, which is $50,000 USD, will that now be refunded to these backers as well? Because again, the Kickstarter clearly labeled that if the game for whatever reason is closed down, all money funded will be given back to these investors. But the way that this is all going, I'm starting to think that none of that is really going to happen now. So this then brings up another question. What happens now? Lawsuits? I would wager. Yeah, probably. There's no way that the Intrepid founders are going to be able to get away with this due to how much is coming out right now. They effectively swindled thousands of people into paying them not only Kickstarter funds, but even monetization like microtransactions, and then they wanted to also have that monthly subscription rate once they had the full 1.0 release too. My question is, what exactly was being discussed behind closed doors at Intrepid that left a Stephen Sheriff saying that he could no longer ethically be part of a studio and game in business that he originally founded? My answer, which is obviously hypothetical here, so just walk with me, is that his husband, this John Moore guy, who's also the CFO, was likely looking at the financials of Ashes and Intrepid and released, and crap, we need a lot more money to stay alive pretty much, is probably the conclusion he came to. And likely John was attempting to mobilize some sort of predatory microtransaction system that could have been pay to win to force more money out of their users. Now, of course, I can't prove this yet, but it's very obvious considering that the one place Intrepid claimed they would never go, the pay to win stance could have been discussed. I can guess this is part of the reason why Stephen Sheriff left, but now it's all crumbling down regardless. And the important part is that if anyone has information, especially game developers, if any one of them is watching this, first of all, hello, I'm sorry for what happened to you, obviously. And second, if you can, please email me. My email's in the description box below. If you're not willing to email me, just get your info out there somehow on social media, some other website, whatever you got to do, just do it. Because you have to expose all of this, because this cannot be allowed to simply exist the way that it is right now. This is how the bad guys get away with fleecing everyone, but this is also bad because as seen here on Steam right now, as I'm writing this video, you are still able to buy into Ashes of Creation right now at its full projected price point despite all of this news coming out. So Steam needs to act quickly and remove this option to buy the game, because they are effectively selling a $65 Canadian game key to a game that won't exist in the next 6 months. It's basically highway robbery at this point, and this option needs to be taken down because it is cut and dry just false advertising towards, potential consumers. But this is horrible, man. It also paints another question I need to ask, which is why are MMOs in general just so hard to make and keep afloat these days? Many MMOs are just simply dying a slow and painful death. I mean, as GamesRadar reported last year even, Final Fantasy XIV, another massive MMO, is still struggling as it bleeds players. This game, which is Square Enix's crown jewel, by the way, in terms of revenue, because fun fact, Final Fantasy XIV is actually the most profitable game ever in Square Enix's catalog, so this slow death is very concerning for obvious reasons. It isn't a new problem, since even 5 years ago, as you can see here, World of Warcraft already was losing upwards of 50% of their player base too. Reasons given up until now included a lack of evergreen content to do in the game, and the game just being far too grindy. While there also being, of course, stiff competition in the space. But if that competition were the problem, then why is basically no MMO right now doing amazing? Even when you ask Google, it says as seen here that Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft are still the kings of this genre, despite both games losing large portions of their player bases, and these are considered the most healthy in the genre, which is not a good sign. So all of these players are leaving in the thousands or even the millions, and then where are they going exactly? Clearly they're not going to other MMOs if all of them are struggling to some capacity right now. So what gives? Obviously, they didn't go to Ashes of Creation because they're imploding now too. So the likelihood is people are starting to just fall off this entire genre, which kind of makes total sense to me. It's not because these sorts of games are bad, but because the over monetization and time commitments are just getting frankly insane if you play games like this. I mean, Crimson Desert, that's from the makers of Black Desert, so Black Desert is an MMO, but Crimson Desert is seen here is now apparently going to be a single player game. I brought this up in my previous video, but it bears repeating. You don't see this happen very often when a massive MMO is announced like Crimson Desert was, promising this huge world with raids and always online persistent worlds, only for the development team to pivot years into making this game, and then turning it instead now into a single player action RPG open world game. But why do that? I think the answer is pretty much everything I shared in this video already. This genre, I mean MMOs, it's just too volatile. There's far too many variables. The content needed to be made is usually at levels just not sustainable by any game development studio. If Blizzard, pretty much the grandfathers of these sorts of games, are unable to keep, WoW interesting enough that it lost half its player base already, or Square Enix is losing revenue with Final Fantasy XIV despite it being their cash cow, the brand recognition and the content available already for that game, that should be enough. But what hope does any new MMO reasonably have then if they can't even do it? I'm not even being a doomer about this, it's just the reality. Honestly, I think this is kind of a positive change in the long run when it comes to game development in the industry, if you ask me. The truth is that these games are heavily over monetized with subscriptions and more because the money needed to keep these things alive is just enormous. It makes far more sense both from a logical perspective and a monetary one to instead focus in on experiences that can just be like bought, played, finished instead, and then they just move on. If you ask me, games don't need to go on forever. Sure, I know the ones that do make all the money like Fortnite or I guess WoW for years is true, but like any industry, things and times are changing. We're already seeing the rise of AA games, the $40 to $50 price tag being far more enticing than the $70 to $80 the AAA guys keep trying to push. It's also why so many free-to-play mobile games come and go, not because they're not fun, but because of the fierce competition. As PC Gamer said at the end of their impressions article on Crimson Desert, by the way, as it reads, it feels in a way like a studio unshackled from the doldrum of MMO monetization rat racing. And that's a very positive thing, if I may add as well. The truth is that many MMOs are just kind of designed to be, in a sense, I gotta say, a waste of your time, honestly. Content lasts way longer if the rewards take far longer to obtain, because you need to grind for hours just to get one thing. The longer that things take, the more likely your subscription is to renew itself, making that company more money in the long run. Yeah, it's a deception that I saw through years ago, which is why I've pretty much entirely walked away from MMOs in general. It's not to say that they're bad games, but I would be lying if I didn't admit that if Blizzard took WoW and somehow turned it into a single-player open-world game that I could enjoy by myself, I would be far more interested in returning to that world over just playing World of Warcraft by like the way it is myself again. Last time I played WoW, I had an Alliance hero at level 90. I haven't played the game since, and I never plan to do it again. It's just too expensive and makes no sense, and I'm glad to see stuff like Crimson Desert ditching, as PC Gamer said, that rat race of a genre, to just being a single-player game instead. The thing with Ashes of Creation is that we saw in real time what happens when you prioritize that rat race over really anything else. You get a game with mixed ratings on Steam, filled with microtransaction nonsense, and a monthly subscription on top of everything else that they wanted to push once they hit that full release again. And the likelihood that Intrepid Studios refunds anyone is probably not really going to happen, which is why I believe the next logical step is that the people who did play the game, especially those who kickstarted it, will have to form together and file a class action lawsuit against Intrepid. There we go. I know Kickstarter and other platforms like it are obviously notoriously known for pushing games that largely end up being snake oil pitches most of the time, but this with Intrepid is just kind of ridiculous because they definitely made far more than that $3 million they made at the beginning off of this game alone. Again, this thing has been in early access pretty much for about 9 years so far. Thankfully, at least, that supposed subscription fee was only going to be implemented once the game hit its full 1.0 release. Because if people were paying that $15 a month before all of this, man, that would have been even worse, man. They would have ran away with so much money. But I was also reading things online, and this is kind of weird, but I discovered that Steven Sheriff, the guy who ran Ashes, allegedly he has a past in pyramid schemes. There was a big Reddit thread on it where Steven allegedly worked for a company named Zango, which lied to their customers back in the day, claiming that their products, which were drinks made with a special juice mixer apparently, were claiming that these drinks, and I'm not kidding, could cure cancer. Of course, these drinks couldn't cure cancer, but Steven allegedly, according to this, still pushed it anyway. anyways. As that Reddit post showed here, Steven Sheriff alongside his mother Sharon were pulling in where that red arrow is around $350,000 a month in sales from this supposed Zango juice pyramid scheme. I have dealt with these sorts of people, by the way, when I used to work in restaurants before I did YouTube. I used to have an entire pyramid scheme group that came into my place of work every single Thursday. I'm not kidding, for months. And it was so very obvious that this was a pyramid scheme because there was always this one table of people who were the best dressed out of everybody. And they would order the most expensive drinks and all of the food, and they would share none of it with anyone else around them. And then these other people that were much more quieter, sitting at separate tables by themselves, they would order maybe a pop or like a small appetizer, which told me that the big dogs with the fat wallets, they were sitting at the top of that pyramid and they were languishing in the amount of money they were making off everyone else around them. And I kid you not, every time these people left the restaurant, all over the place, you would find their business cards literally everywhere. They'd even put their business cards over the business cards of the managers who worked at the restaurant at the front desk. So if you pulled a card, you would pull their pyramid scheme instead of the thing you actually wanted. So when I tell you that I've dealt with these people, they are actual snake oil salesmen in real life. So if this is true about the Steven guy who runs Ashes of Creation as well, which again, I'm saying allegedly for now, then it may be true that this game was always meant to be a scam in the first place. But regardless, the end game here is this game was promised to be this massive MMO experience, and it failed to deliver on everything. It completely fell apart, and now developers are being screwed out of their own bonuses, their health insurance, and they're not even being paid for their work now. And the people at the top, like always, the guys with the fat wallets ordering everything, are now running away with that bag into the void of the internet, never to be heard from again. I wouldn't even be surprised if Steven ends up disappearing, never to be found, honestly. Like, he just goes to a different country or something, changes his name even. And while sure the MMO genre is dying in general, since it is a tired relic of the past, this entire thing with Ashes, it reeks of a pyramid scheme. And it's very important that people get what they deserve from these people back, otherwise they will just keep doing it. But what do you think? Let me know. Thanks for being here. Subscribe. I'll keep my eye to this if things get more interesting too. And please, if you ever question yourself, if you're a part of some sort of pyramid scheme in real life, you probably most definitely are, and you need to remove yourself from that immediately before it gets worse. I promise you it won't get better. Don't get screwed over, guys, but all right, I'll see you next time.